bringing national topics that matter to Oklahoma. With Congressman Tom Cole. This is Cole on Congress.
Thank you today for joining me for another episode of Cole on Congress. I'm pleased to welcome the newest member of the Oklahoma delegation to the show, Congressman Steve Russell. Through years of service both in the military and the Oklahoma State Senate, Steve has already demonstrated his commitment to preserving America. Steve was honored it's an honor to serve with you, frankly, and to have you on the show. And I got to start off with just your unbelievable background of service to the United States of America. So it's not as if our audience doesn't know who you are or what you've been doing, but tell them a little bit about your background.
Well, I grew up in Del City, and I served 21 years in the United States Army after graduating from college at Ouachita Baptist University in Arkansas. Met my wife there my senior year. We'll be married 30 years this year. I got a commission in the infantry in 1985, and in the course of my career in the military, I was able to serve in a lot of different places around the country, overseas in multiple locations. A veteran of Kosovo, Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Iraq. When I was in Iraq, I commanded Task Force 122 Infantry, and our unit was a major player in the hunt and capture of Saddam Hussein. I wrote a book about that called We Got Him, published by Simon & Schuster in 2011. And my political entry was odd. I did not see any of these things ever happening. All I wanted to be when I was a kid was a soldier. But after raising 5 kids in the military and they were hitting teen years, they needed a dad at home. I was gone 3 out of 5 years at a stretch, and it was time to come home and watch my kids grow. So I retired from the service in 2006 and came back to Oklahoma. And then I started a small rifle manufacturing business, Two Rivers Arms. And I entered the state senate in a district that we both shared in our state senate history.
Well, I was very proud to be represented by you, and even prouder now to have you as a colleague.
Well, thank you. And it was an important time. I served 4 years in the state senate from 2008 to 2012, and it allowed me to make the transition from soldier to, statesman. I like to think it rather than politician. That seems to have kind of a negative connotation.
You also served with the first Republican majority in state history in the state Senate.
That's exactly right. That year in 2008, we were able to gain the majority, and it was very important for a lot of key legislation. We had a Democratic governor, Brad Henry, at the time, but I got some important measures passed. The Soldiers Relief Act, which soldiers in Lawton benefit from today, probably don't even realize it, that makes all Oklahoma residents tax exempt from their military pay for federal taxes. If they're Guard, Reserve, or active duty and they're residents of Oklahoma, they no longer have to pay federal taxes. I paid what I called the Oklahoma citizenship penalty for years, and so when I became a state lawmaker, I wanted to get that changed, and I was able to.
Well, you also, of course, got to serve for the first time with an Oklahoma Republican governor and a majority in both houses. That had never happened before, and that by January of 2011, technically, you were in that situation.
And it was exciting because we did see some important changes that were able to be made. Some reforms were attempted. Now later we've seen actually that they've been able to take hold. Governor Fallon, who used to hold this seat in the 5th Congressional District, she's been a great governor, and I think it's been important to see the vitality that the 5th Congressional District has watched over the last 10 or 15 years. Oklahoma City, people that haven't been there in a long time, they come back and they're like, wow, this place has really changed, for the better. And we all get that. We like that. But it's important also that we stay connected to our rural communities. In my case, in Pottawatomie County, Seminole County, There's still a lot of issues there, a lot of draconian regulations that are affecting our farming and ranching community, and these are types of things that are really vital to Oklahoma in all of our congressional districts.
Let me ask you a little bit about, given the fact that you served with such distinction for over 20 years, and obviously now are looked upon and with a great deal of admiration in the Congress. I mean, people value your expertise. They know that you bring a special perspective on the United States military. What are the things you want to accomplish in terms of the military itself? And obviously you're a very proud veteran, and I know how hard you fight for veterans. What are the things you'd like to see done there?
I'm very concerned, obviously, about our veterans' health care with the VA system. I would like to see the day where we could, just much like TRICARE as a military retiree, I served 21 years, I now can go with a copay to the physician that I choose. It might be the same one that you would choose. It is in the same system out there. You can get good care. That is probably a better view, a better system. You're not spending hundreds of billions of dollars on overhead, on infrastructure, on pensions and salaries, all of that. You're making payments, you're making a copay. It would be a lot cheaper for the government, and I think the quality of care would be a vast improvement. That's probably a ways down the road, but I think it's an important goal to look at. When I was advocating with veterans groups, prior to coming to Congress, we toured the country 3 times, pointing out the problems with our VA care system. And you don't have to convince any veteran of that or any veteran's family of those issues. So that's something that I think we have to lend a soldier's voice to here in Congress on what that means. I'm always very tuned into foreign policy and how our defense relates to that. So I've developed a very strong relationship with a number of ambassadors already, have been able to make some international trips. We just got back from Germany, met with members of the German parliament, met with ministers, even got to meet with Angela Merkel, which was a great honor. We talked very important things, Ukraine, trade, cybersecurity. They're very concerned about that, obviously, with the flap that we've had back and forth.
Well, when we're tapping her phone, I'm sure she wasn't very pleased.
Yeah, they did make us check all of our cell phones in prior. But the Germans have been great allies, and in your district and also in Oklahoma, we've had so many soldiers that have served in Germany, have developed strong ties there, and so we have to keep good relations with our allies and our friends, whether it's in the Pacific or whether it's in Europe. And then obviously we have the threat of growing international terrorism, but it's also domestic now. We're fighting an ideology. The good news is we've defeated ideologies before with communism. Took a while. In 1917, we didn't take it that serious. 1930, we thought, maybe this is a problem. 1948, you had Harry Truman that said, this is going to stop. We're going to contain it. And he set a doctrine for the United States that we followed for 40 more years until Ronald Reagan was able to make its collapse. We have to take the long view, I believe, on some of these Islamic jihadist ideologies that seem to inspire radicals to do horrific acts around the world.
When you came into Congress, and I'm going to drag our audience a little bit into congressional weeds here, but it's very important. You were selected by your Republican colleagues, over 40 of them, new members, to be one of 2 members that represent them on the steering committee. For our audience, the Republican Steering Committee is the body that makes the decisions as to which committees members are going to get to, where the new members are going to go and where existing members might move to committees, move to, frankly, sometimes a more powerful committee or a committee they have a special expertise or interest in, a place they really want to serve. When you get a job like that, you're expected to take care of everybody else first.
Right.
And you certainly did that. I had the good fortune to sit on that committee as a former NRCC chairman, and you and your colleague from Michigan did a wonderful job. It means you traditionally would get the worst of the committee assignments for that opening 2 years of your career, and then move on, hopefully, and be rewarded for selfless service. Two things. One, our audience should know the best thing about that job is actually not just doing it and having won the confidence of your colleagues. You're in front of the leadership of the Republican Conference for hours on end. Their staff is there, and they're forming a first impression of you as a freshman. It's a real pivotal moment in somebody's career who's fortunate enough to get there at all. And they're paying attention to you because they know your peers have chosen you as a leader. So it was a tremendous compliment to you and obviously to our state that you held a position like that and still hold a position like that. But second, you ended up pretty good in the scheme of things. So let folks know where you're at on committees and a little bit about how you got there.
Well, and I appreciate that. And it was very humbling to serve on steering. One, you do carry the weight of the responsibility to be a good advocate for your freshmen that are coming in. These are smart people. I mean, they come with incredible, diverse backgrounds. They've all been successful in life. And now they come here, we call them freshmen, but it's not like they're young kids. I mean, these are seasoned, very successful people. And so to advocate for them and to represent them, we do take it very serious. And you're right about a tremendous education, to be able to see the inner workings of the decision making in the House of Representatives among our conference leadership. That's an invaluable education.
Well, and every chairman, even though they nominally can serve 6 years, they have to be rechosen every 2 years. So every single chairman of a major committee has to come in front of you and make a case either why they should get that chairmanship or why they should be allowed to retain that chairmanship over the next 2 years. So it is extraordinarily educational.
It was. In fact, the day that I got selected by my peers, I was getting calls, hi, this is Paul Ryan, I'd like to talk to you about it. And I'm like, okay. Or, hi, this is Jason Chavitz, and I'd really like to do this. And so it was interesting, and you certainly don't take it lightly. But I think the other thing that I learned just by sitting in the committee, and you have seen the same dynamics, is a lot of the media hype about leadership and about the process and the decision makers. It's just a bunch of nonsense. You look at how these decisions are made, and I'm no stranger to leadership. I'm no stranger to doing hard things. And you look at the decision-making process with the leadership, and it's, I think America ought to be proud that we have people that are that dedicated and are actually making very good policy. If they only knew the conversations that go on in the room, I think that they would be much more assured. But how did I get to my committees?
Why don't you let folks know what the committees are
first? I'm on Education and Workforce. I'm on Oversight and Government Reform, which James Lankford was also on when he was in the House, and he's retained this similar arm in the Senate, a similar committee, which is good because we can work in tandem and are. And then, as you know, because you had even tried to make a push, for me getting on armed services, but as we both know, that's, you gotta do the process, and I didn't feel it was right for me to jump ahead of my peers being on steering. Unfortunately, one of our colleagues, Alan Nunnally, succumbed to cancer, and wonderful man. He was on appropriation, and that's a very sad state of affairs, and that vacancy was filled by Steve Palazzo, also from Mississippi. And when he left the Armed Services Committee, then, I'm sure you'll recall that as we were sitting there in the meeting, completely unknown to me, as this vacancy opened up, the speaker said, we have an overly qualified member that we need to put on Armed Services, so if there's no objection, I'm putting Steve Russell on the Armed Services Committee. And I think I said something like, holy cow, and Hal Rogers pointed at me and says, good speech. And so it was really, it was very humbling. I do feel very comfortable on the committee, not comfortable in the seriousness of the work, but it is an area that I feel some confidence that I can bring a background and a set of skills to help serve our nation again. And so I'm very grateful to be on the House Armed Services Committee with these other committees.
Well, I tell you, it is a real demonstration of how much confidence, obviously, our leadership, but collectively the steering committee has in you, just having watched you perform. Because again, normally there'd be multiple people competing for this. There would be a struggle for this, because there's 33 votes or so in that room, and different regions put forward people they want, and this is a big deal. This is this is the largest part of the federal discretionary budget. We live in an extraordinarily dangerous time, and the fact that you would get that kind of unanimous support, really, from your colleagues around the country, and the leadership usually prefers something like this to be fought out, where they're not in the middle of it, and you were the consensus candidate. People at home should know what an exceptional achievement that was.
Well, I appreciate it, and now I want to do my due diligence, and I want to make sure that I take that trust. As you know, the military is very important in Oklahoma with our 5 military bases, and with our aerospace industry, and so much, let alone our veterans community, which is proportionately higher than most states. But defense-related issues are important not only to what we do every day, but on deployments. Oklahomans feel it firsthand all the time, and so it is vital that we make sure that we give them the best tools that they can possibly have.
Well, we not only put you on that committee, we put you on that committee exactly at the moment that we were writing the defense authorization bill, $613 billion bill for the military, and which will be coming to the floor very soon, actually, and you've been very actively engaged. What's it been like? You've been at both ends of this operation.
Yes,
you've been one of the guys we've asked to go do some really tough things, and now you're helping make the decisions about how they're going to be equipped, how they're going to be paid, what are we going to do with their families are concerned, how should they be deployed, what's the appropriate end strength. I mean, incredible complexity, and you know more than almost anybody in Congress what the consequences of those decisions are. So tell me a little bit about the process, and inside the defense bill, what are the things that you've been trying to accomplish and the special perspective you've been bringing to the discussion?
I think the first challenge that we had was the budget shortfalls. The president said, I want $600 billion for defense. So, well, that's nice, but we also had the president give us the sequester. The two don't match. He could ask for anything, but we would have ended up with $523 billion by law. So the biggest challenge, and Chairman Mac Thornberry has done a marvelous job in this regard, to figure out how can we continue to make our defense prepared while dealing with overseas contingencies like Syria. We have Iraq now again, Afghanistan, deployments to our NATO allies on the Ukrainian periphery. There are a lot of things going on, and so how do you deal with that? And we put a large overseas contingency fund in there to help meet these shortfalls and plus it up. And then it was creative enough so that it had a little more flexibility, and I think that was very, very important. And then the striking thing about being in the committee, especially during the chairman's markup, 63 members, 63 seats, and 19.5-hour committee meeting. And you're hearing everything on the political spectrum. I sat there as a former soldier thinking, gosh, I didn't know that I was such an evil person when I was a soldier, in terms of beating women and having assault and doing all of these things. Some of the speeches and some of the political views were, to me, quite surprising. But at the end of it...
I would hope not from our side of the aisle.
No, they weren't from our side of the aisle, but at the end of it, after all of the political posturing, the good news was we did have some bipartisan effort on some key amendments, and the chairman's mark as a whole was supported overwhelmingly, 60 members, only 2 dissenters, allowed that markup to come out to go to the floor. That's bipartisanship. And so after the speeches and the posturing, we get that. But when it came to trying to do what was right, we saw a strong bipartisan effort, and my hope is we'll see that also on the floor.
Well, you also were involved not just obviously in the amendment process and the final writing of the bill in committee. I mean, you've continued to be active since then. You've got a couple of amendments that you've managed to get through the ever contentious Rules Committee and on the floor. That's no small feat in and of itself.
It wasn't.
Tell folks a little bit about the amendments that you're going to be offering to the defense bill.
Well, I was able to get some amendments in committee. Probably the one that was kind of misunderstood before people read it. Not that has ever happened before, But as you know, the Murrah bombing was. It affected Oklahomans deeply, more so than the rest of the country, much like New Yorkers in 9/11. And so what people didn't realize was that this was a federal installation. It had recruiting offices in it, and 6 of our armed forces personnel were at their duty stations during the bombing. And so they were at their assigned place of duty on a federal building, and it was a domestic terror attack in which they lost their lives. And so by every criteria, they should have received the honors afforded to those that gave their lives in service to their country, losing them to an act of terror. And so I was able to put an amendment on which had unanimous support to have these 6 warriors that lost their lives at their recruiting post to be awarded the Purple Heart, and that is now in the markup. And then there were a couple of service organizations, now only one. The others are distancing themselves from them. They misread it. They thought it was for everyone that was killed in the bombing or all of this. And it's like, no. They called it an act of domestic violence, really. No one in our nation, leaders down to Oklahomans, have ever viewed it as such. So this was something that I think it's been a long time coming, and it doesn't diminish the value of the award or of the honor of those warriors that gave their lives. The other thing that kind of an odd one is a fire hose issue. The Government Services Agency used to deal with fire hoses, and they meet them to a standard, and they use certain synthetic fibers. Well, when DLA picked up fire hoses as a part of its responsibility, they had what they called the Berry Amendment, which means it can only be American made. Well, some of these key synthetic fibers are made by NATO allies or others or whatever, and they can't use them for fire hoses. So there was a big backlog in getting something that we all need in our communities. And so I put the fire hose amendment on the bill so that we can get hoses back out to our, little things. And you don't think that those things are important, but they have an impact.
Yeah, if you don't have a fire hose when you need one,
it
has a pretty big impact.
Pretty big impact. And then we're monitoring very closely as we move towards our female warriors and integration into some of the areas where we've not seen them before on battlefields, very concerned about how we take care of them in their health issues with regard to injuries. Study after study, we've seen that they are more prone to injuries, and we want to be able to mitigate that. And so as you heard yesterday in Rules, we were able to craft it, work with other members, work with the chairman and others, so that we can do the right thing, that we're training our warriors, not harming our warriors as we're trying to get them the skills that they need.
Yeah, I thought that was an extraordinarily thoughtful amendment, and it had the risk, as these things do, of being misconstrued by people as well. Gosh, he's trying to keep women out of the combat arms. Quite the opposite. It was trying to make sure that if that decision's, we're doing that, we're putting people in these places, and we have tremendous female warriors, that we have to recognize that there will be differences in injury patterns, and so what's the appropriate preparation, what's the right training, and what's the right mitigation during service and after service. So we're actually treating each warrior individually to the very best that science will allow.
That's it, and what I found is because it's such a thorny issue and because it's a political hot potato, nobody wants to touch it. I felt that with my background, I might be able to address it and take it on and say, look, regardless of what you think or what emotional baggage you're bringing to this issue, the bottom line is we need to take care of our warriors. And so it's been a very thorny path to make that case, but fortunately we've gotten some good support on it.
You've done a great job. Let's briefly move to your other committee and tell me what you're doing on oversight right now, because you said James Langford was your predecessor there. He did some absolutely fabulous work in pointing out areas where we were wasteful or inefficient, or frankly sometimes working on areas where politics had crept into the administration of government in
Well, I think
ways.
the biggest thing that we've focused on in a great many of our hearings is the protection of the president. Look, we can't lose a president, and our Secret Service has to be Johnny on the spot. And everything from drones to motorcycles to knocking down pylons and barriers to sex scandals. It's not to diminish the great service that our Secret Service agents do, but it is to question the leadership that allows apparently some real problems with the protection of the president. And we are drilling down on that. In fact, we'll hear a hearing this week on that very issue, one of many that we've had. Electromagnetic pulse. These are measures that we have to take precautions on. One of the reasons the military moved back into NORAD, solar flares, things that we don't normally think about but would have a devastating impact on us. EPA, well, there's everyone's favorite punching bag, but rightfully so. These are all issues that we have to dig in on. And then, as you know, with the release of our Waste Watch, I'm trying to continue a lot of the legacy that Dr. Coburn did, where we can expose wasteful spending, and there's no shortage of that to find.
Well, I tell you what, those are the range of things that you can deal with in oversight is really the key to it. And you've got a brilliant new chairman there in Jason Chaffetz.
Yeah, he's done a great job.
He is unbelievably talented.
And he's reconciled the committee. There was a lot of division there. It is much more congenial.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Quickly, we've only got about a minute left. Give me two or three of the people that have had a big influence. You've had an extraordinary life already. Amazing career, soldier, state legislator, now congressman. Who do you credit for getting you on that path?
Gosh, a lot of people. Obviously, my parents. I get my outgoing people nature from my dad. He and I are a lot alike in that regard. My mother taught me how to never quit. I nearly died several times in my youth, and I was kind of a frail child, and she gave me that fighting spirit. And then my great-grandfather, a World War I veteran, tremendous influence on my life as a man and as a leader. And there are many others, great mentors that I've had throughout my life in business, military, politics.
Well, the show goes quickly. I want to have you back sometime and just go through your personal pantheon of heroes. Yeah. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Cole on Congress. Until next time, this is Congressman Tom Cole from the nation's capital. Thank you for joining us today. And Steve, thank you very much for your service and for taking time to be on the show.
Thank you.